The little foal should never have survived the night. Its ribs showed through its dusty brown coat. Its legs trembled with every step. One ear drooped as though it no longer had the strength to hold itself upright. Yet somehow, against every law of nature, it kept walking. Not toward food. Not toward water. Toward one man. Toward a rancher who had no idea why a starving wild foal was following him across 20 miles of lonely country roads. By the time he discovered the truth, he would fall to his knees in tears. It was just after sunrise when Ethan Carter finished repairing a broken fence along the northern edge of Cedar Creek Ranch. Autumn winds swept through the golden grasslands, carrying dry leaves across the dirt road. The mountains beyond the valley glowed under the first rays of morning light, while flocks of birds drifted lazily overhead. Normally, Ethan loved mornings like this. But not anymore. Not since losing his wife 18 months earlier. The ranch had become painfully quiet. No laughter echoed from the farmhouse. No fresh coffee waited on the porch. Only silence. The kind that slowly settles inside a person until it begins to feel normal. His only company these days was an aging border collie named Scout, who faithfully rode beside him in the passenger seat of his dusty pickup. As Ethan loaded his tools into the truck, Scout suddenly lifted his head. The old dog never barked without reason. A low growl escaped his throat. Ethan turned toward the dirt road. First, he saw nothing. Then movement. Far behind the truck. A tiny figure. Walking slowly. Almost stumbling. Ethan narrowed his eyes. A foal. The little horse stopped the moment Ethan looked at it. Its breathing was heavy. Its head hung low. The animal looked exhausted. Starving. Barely able to remain standing. Ethan climbed out of the truck. Easy there. The foal instantly took one nervous step backward. But definitely wild. No halter. No brand. No signs of human ownership. Its frightened eyes never left Ethan's face. He crouched carefully. You don't belong out here alone. The foal hesitated. Then turned around. For a moment Ethan assumed it would disappear into the hills. Instead, it waited, almost as if expecting him to follow. Scout whined softly. You see that too? The old dog wagged his tail uncertainly. The foal stared for another few seconds. Then quietly walked away. Ethan shook his head. Poor thing. He climbed back into the truck. Work needed finishing. He couldn't chase every stray animal that wandered near the ranch. He started the engine. Drove away. 5 miles later. Scout barked again. Ethan checked the mirror. His heart nearly stopped. The same foal. Still following. Its tiny legs struggled to keep pace. Dust covered its coat. It looked even weaker now. Yet somehow, it refused to give up. Ethan pulled over immediately. What in the world? The foal stopped several yards away. Watching him. Waiting. Ethan opened a container of fresh water. He carefully placed it on the ground before backing away. The foal stared suspiciously. Several long moments passed. Finally, it stepped forward. Drank desperately. As though it hadn't seen water for days. Ethan's chest tightened. Where's your mother? The foal lifted its head. Looked toward the mountains. Then back at Ethan. Before quietly stepping away again. Scout walked closer. The foal flinched. But didn't run. Instead, it watched the old dog curiously. Scout slowly wagged his tail. The foal relaxed slightly. Ethan smiled sadly. I guess he thinks you're safe. He filled the truck with hay from the ranch supply. Placed a small pile beside the road. The foal sniffed it. Ate only a few bites. Then looked back toward Ethan again. Not interested in the food. Interested in him. Hours passed. Every time Ethan resumed driving, the foal followed. Across gravel roads. Through shallow streams. Over rolling hills. Never quitting. Never turning away. By sunset, Ethan finally stopped beside an abandoned windmill. The little horse collapsed from exhaustion. Its breathing became dangerously shallow. Ethan ran over immediately. Hey! He gently knelt beside it. The foal tried standing again. Then rested its head against Ethan's arm. The first touch. The first moment of trust. Ethan carefully wrapped his jacket around the shivering animal. It's okay. I've got you. The foal closed its eyes briefly, as if those words alone were enough to keep fighting. After several minutes, the little horse struggled back onto its feet. Instead of staying beside Ethan, it walked several yards away, then turned around, looking directly at him. Waiting. Ethan frowned. You want me to follow you? The foal took another few weak steps. Stopped again. Watching him. Scout barked once, almost encouraging him. Ethan sighed. This is crazy. Yet something deep inside told him this wasn't random. Animals rarely behaved like this, especially frightened wild foals. The tiny horse continued walking toward the distant mountains, stopping every few minutes to make sure Ethan remained behind. Not running, leading. As darkness settled over the valley, Ethan made a decision that would change his life forever. He grabbed a flashlight, left the truck behind, and followed the starving little foal into the wilderness. He had no idea. The tiny horse wasn't searching for help. It was trying to keep a promise its mother could no longer fulfill. The tiny foal kept walking. Not quickly. Not confidently. Every few steps its knees buckled beneath the weight of exhaustion. Its breathing was ragged, and its small body swayed with every gust of cold mountain wind. Yet it never stopped looking back, always making sure Ethan was still following, as if losing him now would mean losing everything. Darkness settled over the valley. Only Ethan's flashlight cut through the growing shadows as Scout trotted quietly beside him. The old border collie never wandered ahead. He stayed close, watching the foal with unusual concern, almost as though he sensed something Ethan couldn't yet understand. Ethan spoke softly. Easy, little one. You don't have to keep walking. The foal paused. Its ears twitched. For one hopeful moment Ethan thought it might finally rest. Instead, it turned toward a narrow trail climbing into the hills. Then continued. The path grew steeper. Loose rocks rolled beneath Ethan's boots. Branches scraped against his jacket. The foal stumbled repeatedly now. Twice it nearly fell. Each time it struggled back onto its feet before Ethan could reach it. It refused to be carried. It refused to stop. You're one stubborn little fighter, Ethan whispered. The foal looked back. For the first time, its frightened eyes seemed softer. Not completely trusting, but no longer afraid. An hour later they reached an old creek bed. The water was almost gone, reduced to shallow pools between smooth stones. The foal finally stopped. Its legs trembled violently. It lowered its head to drink, but it barely had the strength. Ethan slowly knelt beside it. This time the foal didn't back away. He carefully scooped water into his hands, holding it close. The foal hesitated, then drank directly from Ethan's palms. Scout wagged his tail gently. Ethan smiled through tired eyes. There you go. You don't have to do this alone. After drinking, the foal nudged Ethan's sleeve with its nose. A tiny gesture, barely noticeable, but it carried enormous meaning. The first sign of gratitude. The first spark of trust. Then something unexpected happened. The foal suddenly lifted its head. Its ears pointed toward the dense forest ahead. It gave a soft, desperate whinny. Not loud. Not frightened. Calling. Waiting. Silence answered. No horse returned the call. No movement. Only the whisper of wind through the pine trees. Ethan's smile faded. You're looking for someone. The foal called again. This time longer. More desperate. Its little body shook as it waited. Still. Nothing. Scout lowered his head. Even the old dog seemed to understand. Ethan placed a gentle hand on the foal's neck. I think. He paused. I think your mother isn't coming. The foal closed its eyes for a moment, then quietly began walking again. The trail narrowed until it disappeared beneath thick trees. Moonlight filtered through the branches. Everything felt strangely still, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, Scout barked sharply. The foal froze. Ethan swept his flashlight across the trees. Nothing. A faint sound. Rustling leaves. Heavy breathing. Ethan stepped forward cautiously. The beam of light landed on something lying beneath a fallen pine tree. His heart sank. A mare. Beautiful. Completely motionless. The foal rushed forward. Its tiny legs carried it faster than Ethan thought possible. It reached the mare and immediately began nudging her neck. And again. Waiting for her to stand. Waiting for her to answer. She never moved. Ethan slowly approached. He knelt beside the mare. One look told him everything. She had suffered a serious injury, likely from falling while escaping a rock slide several days earlier. She hadn't survived. The foal continued nudging her. Softly at first. Then harder. Growing more desperate. Finally letting out a heartbreaking cry that echoed through the silent forest. Ethan looked away. Tears filled his eyes. He had seen loss before. He had buried animals. Friends. Even his wife. But watching this tiny foal refuse to accept its mother's death broke something inside him. He whispered quietly, "I'm so sorry." The foal rested beside the mare, refusing to leave, refusing to eat, refusing even to look at Ethan. Minutes passed. Neither Ethan nor Scout moved. Sometimes, grief deserves silence. Finally, Ethan noticed something unusual. Tucked beneath the mare's body was a faded leather saddlebag. Weathered, completely out of place on a wild horse. Carefully, Ethan pulled it free. Inside he found a small notebook wrapped in oilcloth, a silver pocket watch, and a folded letter. The paper was old but surprisingly well preserved. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was shaky. "If someone ever finds this mare, please help her Foal. She has trusted no human except me. If the little one leads you here, it means she believes you are kind enough to finish what I no longer can." Ethan stared at the letter, confused. There was another person? Mia wasn't there to answer. Only the quiet forest. He turned the page over. At the bottom, a single signature. His breathing stopped. It wasn't a stranger's name. It was his late wife, Emma Carter. Ethan dropped to his knees. His hands shook uncontrollably. "No." His voice cracked. "This can't be." The letter was dated just 3 weeks before Emma's accident. She had never told him. Not once. She had secretly been caring for this wild mare. Protecting her. Leaving food. Building trust. All without asking for recognition. Tears streamed down Ethan's face. The foal slowly walked over. Instead of returning to its mother, it rested its head gently against Ethan's shoulder. As if it finally understood. The person its mother had trusted was standing right beside it. Ethan wrapped his arms around the trembling little horse. For the first time since losing Emma, he cried without trying to hide it. And somewhere deep inside, the walls around his broken heart began to crack. But the greatest surprise was still waiting, because hidden inside Emma's notebook was one final request that would send Ethan on a journey far beyond anything he had imagined. Ethan couldn't stop staring at the signature. Emma Carter. The letters were unmistakable. His wife's careful handwriting. The same handwriting that had filled birthday cards, grocery lists, and little notes she used to leave beside the coffee pot every morning. For a long moment, the world stood still. The little foal rested quietly against his shoulder, unaware that it had just reopened a part of Ethan's heart he believed had been buried forever. Scout sat beside them silently. Even the old dog seemed to understand that this wasn't just another rescue. This was something far bigger. Something Emma had left unfinished. Ethan carefully unfolded the notebook wrapped inside the saddlebag. The leather cover was worn from years of use. Inside were dozens of handwritten entries. Each page described the same wild mare. Her movements, her health, the places she liked to hide, the days she finally accepted food from Emma's hands. One entry caught Ethan's attention immediately. Day 47. She finally let me stand within 5 feet today. She still won't let me touch her. That's okay. Trust isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn. Ethan smiled sadly. That sounded exactly like Emma. She had always believed patience could accomplish what force never could. He turned another page. Day 93. She's expecting a foal. If everything goes well, the little one will grow up completely wild. That's what I want. Freedom is the greatest gift I can protect. Tears blurred Ethan's vision again. Emma had carried this secret alone. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she wanted the horses to remain truly wild. The foal gently nudged the notebook with its nose, as though encouraging Ethan to keep reading. Near the back was another folded letter. Smaller, addressed simply, "For Ethan." His hands trembled as he opened it. "If you're reading this, something probably happened to me before I could introduce you properly. Don't blame yourself. Life doesn't always give us enough time. But promise me one thing. Don't let our little friend grow up alone. The foal won't understand why I'm gone. But maybe, someday, it will understand why you stayed." Ethan covered his face. He couldn't hold back anymore. Months of grief poured out all at once. Scout quietly rested his head against Ethan's leg. The little foal remained beside him, neither trying to fix his pain, simply refusing to let him carry it alone. As dawn broke over the mountains, Ethan buried the mare beneath a large oak tree overlooking the valley. He stacked smooth river stones into a simple memorial. Wildflowers surrounded the grave. The foal stood nearby the entire time, watching, silent. When everything was finished, Ethan removed his hat. "I promise," he whispered, "I'll finish what Emma started." The foal looked up at him. Its frightened eyes seemed calmer now, almost hopeful. The journey back to the ranch was slow. The foal stayed close behind Ethan instead of leading him. Every few minutes it brushed its nose against Scout's tail or Ethan's hand, as if reassuring itself they were still together. The bond between them was growing stronger with every mile. When they finally reached Cedar Creek Ranch, Ethan opened the pasture gate. "You can leave any time," he said softly. "I won't keep you here." The foal stood perfectly still, looking across the wide green fields. Instead of running toward freedom, it walked straight into the old red barn. Ethan laughed quietly through tired eyes. "So, I guess you're home for now." News spread quickly through the neighboring ranches. People came to see the tiny wild foal that had followed a man across miles of wilderness. Most believed the story was exaggerated, until they saw the little horse themselves. One visitor, an elderly wildlife veterinarian named Dr. Helen Brooks, carefully examined the foal. After several minutes, she looked at Ethan with concern. "This little one has been starving much longer than I expected." Ethan nodded. "I know." Dr. Brooks sighed. "But that's not the biggest problem." She gently lifted the foal's front leg. "There are old injuries. He likely traveled much farther than you realize." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked directly at him. "This foal didn't begin following you near your ranch." The pause. "It probably tracked your scent for weeks." Ethan stared in disbelief. "Weeks?" She nodded. "It survived storms, predators, hunger, and mountain crossings. Not because it was searching for food. It was searching for you." The realization hit Ethan harder than anything else. Emma had become part of the mare's life. After Emma died, the mare must have remembered Ethan's scent from the few times he had unknowingly walked those same trails. When the mare realized she was dying, she had sent her foal to find the only human she believed could be trusted. Ethan looked toward the little horse sleeping peacefully inside the barn. "You carried her final wish." The foal twitched gently in its sleep, completely safe for the first time in its young life. Over the following weeks, the foal slowly regained its strength. Its dull brown coat became rich and glossy. Its ribs disappeared beneath healthy muscle. Its playful curiosity returned. Yet one habit never changed. Every morning, before eating, before running, before doing anything else, the little horse walked to the farmhouse porch, waiting for Ethan to come outside. Only then would its day begin. One crisp autumn afternoon, Scout suddenly barked toward the distant hills. The foal lifted its head instantly. Its ears stood straight. It wasn't afraid. It recognized something. Far across the valley, several wild horses stood watching the ranch, hidden among the trees. Quiet, patient. The foal answered with a soft whinny. The distant herd responded, then disappeared back into the mountains. Dr. Brooks smiled. "They know where the little one is." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "And someday..." He looked toward the growing foal. It may choose to return to them. He smiled softly. If that day comes, I'll open the gate myself. But that choice would arrive much sooner than Ethan expected. Because before winter ended, someone else would come looking for the remarkable young horse. And their arrival would force Ethan to make the hardest decision of his life. Winter arrived earlier than anyone expected. Snow covered the rolling hills of Cedar Creek Ranch, turning every fence post and pine tree into a blanket of white. Smoke drifted from the farmhouse chimney while the little foal, no longer starving but still smaller than most horses its age, ran happily through the fresh snow. For the first time in months, it looked like a normal young horse. Healthy, curious, full of life. Every morning it still greeted Ethan on the front porch before eating breakfast, and every evening it rested beside Old Scout near the red barn. The ranch felt alive again. Something Ethan hadn't felt since Emma's passing. One snowy afternoon, while repairing a fence, Ethan noticed the foal suddenly freeze. Its ears pointed toward the distant ridge. Scout stopped barking. Even the birds became silent. Ethan looked up. 3 horses stood on the hill, watching. The largest was a silver-gray mare with a long scar across her shoulder. Beside her stood 2 younger stallions. None of them crossed onto the ranch. They simply waited. The little foal answered with a soft whinny. The wild horses responded, then disappeared into the forest. Dr. Helen Brooks watched through her binoculars. They'd been checking on the foal for weeks. Ethan frowned. You think they're family? Helen nodded. Horses remember. They form bonds that can last for years. They know one of their own is here. That evening Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Emma's journal. She had written one sentence over and over again. Love doesn't mean keeping something forever. Sometimes love means helping it return where it belongs. Those words echoed in Ethan's mind long after the fire burned low. The following week, unexpected visitors arrived. A black SUV rolled slowly into the ranch driveway. 2 wildlife conservation officers stepped out alongside a state biologist named Sarah Mitchell. She introduced herself politely. We've been tracking a missing wild herd in these mountains. Ethan listened quietly. Sarah continued, Our field cameras captured something remarkable. She showed him several photographs. Standing beside the herd was the foal's mother, only days before she died. Another image followed. The mare was looking directly toward one of Emma's feeding stations. Sarah smiled gently. Whoever cared for her earned something almost impossible. Her trust. Ethan lowered the photographs. My wife. Sarah nodded. We've heard about Emma. Several hikers mentioned a woman who quietly protected wild horses. She never asked for recognition. Then Sarah became serious. The foal belongs to a protected wild population. We'd like to relocate it. Silence filled the porch. Ethan looked toward the barn. The little horse was sleeping peacefully beside Scout, completely unaware of the conversation. That night Ethan barely slept. Part of him wanted to keep the foal forever. After everything they had survived, how could he let it go? But another voice, Emma's voice, kept whispering inside his heart. Freedom is the greatest gift. The next morning the foal greeted Ethan as usual. It gently nudged his shoulder before following him across the ranch. Every few minutes it looked back to make sure he was still there. Exactly as it had done the first day they met. Ethan smiled sadly. You still don't want to lose me. The foal softly rested its head against his chest. Scout walked over slowly. Now, his muzzle almost completely white. The faithful dog looked at Ethan with gentle eyes before sitting beside the foal. For a brief moment, the 3 of them stood together in complete silence. A family built not by blood, but by trust. Later that afternoon, Sarah returned. So, have you decided? Ethan looked across the snowy pasture. The foal was chasing snowflakes with playful excitement. Finally, he nodded. I promised someone I'd finish what she started. 3 days later, the transport trailer waited quietly near the ranch gate. It wasn't designed like an ordinary livestock trailer. It was open, spacious, built specifically for wildlife conservation. No chains, No force. Only patience. The foal refused to enter. Not out of fear. It simply stayed beside Ethan, watching him, waiting, as though asking one heartbreaking question. Are you coming too? Ethan knelt beside the little horse. He gently stroked its neck. His voice trembled. You were never mine. I was only lucky enough to walk beside you for a little while. Tears filled his eyes. But your mother trusted me, and I'm going to honor that trust. He removed Emma's blue scarf from his pocket, the same scarf she had worn while caring for the mare. He tied it loosely around the foal's neck. So you'll always carry a piece of her. The little horse closed its eyes, as though recognizing the familiar scent. Then something incredible happened. Instead of resisting, the foal calmly walked into the trailer on its own. No ropes, no pushing, no fear, only trust. Everyone watching fell silent. Sarah quietly wiped away a tear. I've never seen a wild foal do that. Ethan smiled through his own tears. It wasn't following the trailer. It was following a promise. As the trailer doors remained open, the foal looked back one final time. Its eyes met Ethan's. Neither moved. Neither made a sound. The moment lasted only seconds. But Ethan knew he would remember it for the rest of his life. The trailer slowly pulled away. Scout sat beside Ethan without moving. Snow continued falling softly across the empty ranch. For the first time since Emma died, the silence returned. But somehow, it no longer felt lonely, because Ethan knew love had not left the ranch. It had simply continued its journey. Yet neither Ethan nor Sarah realized one extraordinary surprise was still waiting beyond the mountains. Because the little foal wasn't traveling toward an ordinary herd. It was returning to a place where Emma's kindness had become a legend among the wild horses. And what happened there would leave everyone speechless. The journey into the mountains took nearly 6 hours. The wildlife trailer moved slowly along winding roads before finally reaching a protected valley that very few people had ever seen. Towering pine forests surrounded open meadows blanketed in fresh snow, while a crystal-clear river cut through the center of the valley. It was a place untouched by fences, crowds, or noise. When the trailer finally stopped, everyone climbed out quietly. Sarah looked toward Ethan. Ready? Ethan nodded, though his heart wasn't. The trailer door was opened. For several long seconds, nothing happened. The little foal simply stood inside, looking at Ethan. Not frightened, not confused, just waiting, as if asking for permission one last time. Ethan smiled through tears. You've already been brave enough. He stepped closer and gently rested his forehead against the foal's. You don't need me anymore. The pause. But I'll always be here if you do. The little horse softly nudged Ethan's shoulder. The same gentle gesture it had used since the day it found him. It slowly stepped out of the trailer. Into freedom. The valley remained completely silent, until a distant whinny echoed across the mountains. One horse answered, then another, then dozens more. From between the pine trees, a herd emerged. Wild mares, young stallions, playful yearlings, strong leaders. More than 30 horses walked cautiously into the meadow. None of them panicked. None of them ran. Instead, they surrounded the little foal at a respectful distance. Watching, waiting, recognizing. The smallest members of the herd approached first. A young filly sniffed the foal's nose. An older mare gently brushed against its shoulder. The foal answered with a soft whinny. Within moments, it no longer looked like an orphan. It looked like it had come home. Ethan quietly wiped away another tear. Sarah smiled. They remember. Then something unexpected happened. The herd suddenly parted. Every horse stepped aside without being asked, making a clear path toward the forest. Ethan frowned. What are they doing? No one answered. Because no one knew. A few moments later, a magnificent black stallion emerged from the trees. Older, powerful, scarred by years of surviving in the wilderness. His long mane flowed in the mountain wind as he walked slowly toward the foal. The entire herd lowered their heads slightly. Not from fear. From respect. The stallion stopped in front of the little foal. For several quiet moments, neither horse moved. The stallion gently touched the foal's forehead with his own. A silent greeting. A welcome home, Sarah whispered. He's the lead stallion. Ethan watched in amazement. The stallion slowly turned his attention toward Ethan. Their eyes met across the snowy meadow. There was no fear, only quiet understanding. Almost gratitude. The stallion gave a single nod before turning back toward the herd. The foal followed. Not because it was forced, because it had chosen to. As the herd began walking deeper into the valley, the little foal suddenly stopped. It looked back, straight at Ethan, the same way it had looked back every few hundred yards during that first incredible journey. Ethan smiled. You don't have to check anymore. You made it. The foal stood still for one last moment. Then it gave a joyful whinny that echoed across the mountains before racing after the herd. Helvet, thrown, free. Scout barked happily from beside Ethan. Even the old dog seemed proud. Sarah quietly handed Ethan something she had found inside the transport trailer. It was Emma's blue scarf. The foal had somehow slipped it off before joining the herd. Folded neatly, almost as though it had intentionally left it behind. Ethan held the scarf gently. He smiled through fresh tears. I think he wanted me to keep this. Sarah nodded. Maybe. Or maybe he already carries everything he needs. Months passed. Spring returned to the mountains. Flowers bloomed where snow once covered the valley. Life moved forward, but Ethan never forgot. Instead of closing himself off again, he transformed Cedar Creek Ranch into a sanctuary for injured and orphaned horses. Every animal that arrived was treated with patience instead of force, with compassion instead of fear. Exactly as Emma had always believed. Volunteers came from neighboring towns. Veterinarians donated their time. Children visited the ranch to learn about kindness, wildlife conservation, and the incredible bond between humans and horses. Above the entrance, Ethan placed a simple wooden sign. Emma's promise. No larger explanation was needed. Every spring, Ethan returned to the hidden valley. He never crossed into the herd space. He simply stood quietly on the ridge, watching, waiting, grateful. One beautiful morning, nearly 2 years later, movement caught his eye. The little foal was little no longer. Now a magnificent young stallion, healthy and strong, he stood proudly beside the herd. For a moment he looked toward the ridge, toward Ethan. Even from that great distance, Ethan recognized those eyes. The same gentle eyes that had followed him for miles through hunger, fear, and heartbreak. The young stallion lifted his head and gave a powerful whinny. The sound rolled across the valley. Ethan laughed softly. I remember you too. The stallion pawed the ground once, then turned and disappeared into the herd. Not as a lost foal, but as one of its future leaders. Driving home that afternoon, Ethan realized something Emma had understood long before he did. Sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't rescuing someone forever. Sometimes, it's giving them the strength to return where they truly belong. The starving little foal hadn't followed Ethan because it was lost. It had followed him because its mother believed that even after her own life ended, kindness would finish the journey she no longer could. And she had been right. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in the extraordinary bond between humans and horses. Because every act of kindness, no matter how small, can become a promise that changes a life forever.